I gave my whole life to work, day after day, year after year. I didn't miss a shift, I didn't complain, I did everything I could to raise my children with dignity. I built a home, I paid every bill, I skipped vacations and luxury so my family would have food on the table and a roof over their heads. I thought that would mean something in the end, but I was wrong. After 40 years of working, they put me in a nursing home. My name is Harold Jennings. I'm 82 years old, and I spent most of my life in Kentucky. I was born in 1942, the son of a coal miner and a homemaker. Back then, people didn't talk much about dreams. You did what you had to do. If there was work, you worked. If there wasn't, you waited. My father worked until his back gave out, and my mother never rested a day in her life. I grew up fast, started helping out when I was 10, cutting grass, running errands for neighbors, anything I could do to bring a few coins home. At 17, I got a job at a local hardware store. By 20, I was working construction. That was my life. Concrete, wood, dust, sweat. I wasn't a smart man in books, but I knew how to hold a house together. I married Sarah in 1966. She was calm, steady, kind. We didn't have much at first, but we were careful. We had our first son, Michael, 2 years later. Then came Julie, and finally Daniel. 3 kids, each of them different, each of them everything to me. I worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7. I built houses for other people while slowly saving money to finish my own. Sarah stayed home with the kids. She did more than I ever could. She kept the house running, taught the children manners, and always found a way to stretch a dollar when times were tight. We didn't go out to eat. We didn't fly on planes, but every Sunday we had dinner together. That was sacred. I put all my effort into them. When Michael wanted to join the school band, we sold a few old tools to buy his trumpet. When Julie got sick, I drove overnight to find a doctor who would take her in. When Daniel said he wanted to go to college, I picked up night shifts so we could make it work. I was proud. I thought I was doing the right thing. Sarah passed away in 2004, lung cancer. She never smoked a day in her life. It broke me in ways I can't explain. After she died, I kept working, not because I needed the money, but because I didn't know how to be still. Work was the only thing I understood. I kept fixing things for people, installing cabinets, repairing decks, helping neighbors for nothing, just to keep moving. When I finally stopped working at 75, I still felt strong. My hands were slower, sure, and my knees gave me trouble, but I could take care of myself. I didn't ask my children for anything. I lived alone, kept the house in order, paid my bills on time, but little by little things changed. Michael started calling less. Julie moved out west and stopped visiting. Daniel would come by now and then, but always in a rush. I started having some trouble remembering small things. One time I left the oven on. Another time I forgot where I parked my truck. Nothing serious, just small slips. Then I fell. It wasn't even a big fall. I was reaching for something on the top shelf in the kitchen. Lost balance, hit the floor hard, couldn't get up. I lay there for hours until a neighbor knocked on the door and heard me shouting. I ended up in the hospital with a cracked hip. The next day, Michael and Daniel showed up with papers. I was still in the hospital bed, hooked to wires, when they said, "Dad, we talked about it. We think the safest thing is for you to go to a facility." A facility. That's what they called it. They didn't ask what I wanted. They told me what they had decided. I remember asking how long it would be. Michael just said, "Let's see how it goes." They moved me into the nursing home the same week. They packed my clothes, my toothbrush, my photo albums, left behind the toolbox, the rocking chair Sarah used to sit in, the shelves I built by hand, all gone. When I arrived, the nurse said, "Welcome, Mr. Jennings, let's get you settled." The room was small, a bed, a closet, a window that barely opened. The walls were beige, the light buzzed, the sheets were thin. Everything was quiet except for the sound of wheels on tile floors. I remember sitting on the bed looking around and asking myself, is this it? At first I thought it was temporary, maybe a few weeks, just until I healed. But weeks passed, months passed. I asked about going home and they avoided the question. I called Michael and he said, "Dad, it's just better this way." Better for who? The days here are slow. Breakfast at 7, pills at 8, group time at 10, lunch at 12. Everything is a routine, everything is controlled. The staff is kind but rushed. They don't have time to ask about your life. They know your name because it's on the chart, not because they care. I look around and see people who were once something. A teacher, a mechanic, a mother of 6. Now they sit in wheelchairs waiting for the next meal. Some don't talk anymore. Some just stare at the wall. I try not to lose myself, but it's hard, especially on birthdays, holidays, days when nobody comes. Julie sent me a card once. Daniel brought me socks. Michael hasn't visited in a year. They say they're busy, but I remember every baseball game I drove them to. Every night I stayed up when they were sick. Every penny I saved to make their lives better. And now, I'm a patient in a hallway. The worst part isn't the food or the cold floors. It's the silence, the feeling that your name doesn't mean anything anymore, that everything you did was invisible, that when you gave your life away piece by piece nobody noticed. After 40 years of working, they put me in a nursing home. I didn't expect luxury. I didn't ask for a medal. I just thought they'd remember who I was. But here I am. The first few weeks were the hardest. I wasn't used to being watched every hour, told when to eat, when to sleep, when to take my pills. At home, even when I got older, I still had my own rhythm. I woke up when I wanted. I made coffee the way I liked. I sat on the porch and watched the street. It might not sound like much, but those little choices made me feel like I still had a life. Here, everything is on a schedule. A bell rings and people move. They line us up for meals like we're in school again. And I sit at a table with people who barely speak. One man breathes heavily and stares at his plate. Another woman shakes the entire time. I tried to make conversation, but nobody really listens. Most of them just eat and go back to their rooms. Some fall asleep right at the table. In the beginning, I told myself to be patient, that maybe things would improve, that maybe my kids would visit more often once they saw I was safe. I even asked the front desk to let them know they could call any time. I waited each day. I sat by the window. The view is nothing but a parking lot and some trees, but I waited. One time I saw a red car pull up. I thought it was Michael. I stood up so fast I nearly lost my balance, but it was just a delivery. He never came. That day I realized something. I wasn't waiting for company anymore. I was waiting for something that was never going to happen. I sat back down and stared at the same tree for another hour. I've met a few residents who have been here longer than I have. One man named George said he's been here for 5 years. He told me he hasn't had a single visitor since his daughter left him there. He doesn't even remember what day it was. I asked how he coped, and he just looked at me and said, "You stop hoping, then it gets easier." That sentence stuck with me. I didn't want to stop hoping. I didn't want to accept that this was it, that after all I gave, I would just sit here for years like furniture no one wanted anymore. One of the caregivers, Angela, she tries. She brings books sometimes, even if most of us can't concentrate. She plays music from a little speaker. The other day, she asked me if I liked country. I told her I used to listen to Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson while I worked in the garage. She smiled and played one of their songs while she passed out medication. For a few minutes, I almost felt like myself again. I remembered the garage, the smell of sawdust, the sound of a drill, the quiet of working alone on something that would last. But memories are tricky. They bring comfort and pain at the same time. I remember the night Julie got accepted into college. She ran through the house waving the letter. I remember Daniel falling off his bike and crying like the world had ended. I remember Michael helping me paint the fence when he was 10. All those memories feel close and far at the same time. And now those kids, those little people I carried in my arms, can't find the time to see me. Not even once a month. Not even a phone call to ask how I'm doing. I know they have families now. I know life is busy. I tell myself that every day. But deep down, I can't stop wondering if I did something wrong. Was I too quiet? Did I not say I loved them enough? I always thought actions mattered more than words. I was there, every day. I never left. I never raised a hand. I did everything I could. So what changed? When did I stop being their father and start being an obligation? The staff keeps track of us with charts. Blood pressure, weight, meals eaten, number of falls. I look at the chart by my door and think, that's who I am now. Numbers on a sheet. No mention of the houses I built, the tools I used, the nights I stayed up holding a sick child. Just weight and temperature. One day, one of the nurses asked me if I had any hobbies. I said I used to fix things. She smiled and said, "That's nice," then walked away. I wanted to tell her I fixed everything in my house by hand, that I once rebuilt an entire staircase, that I used to make shelves without measuring twice because I knew exactly what I was doing, but I didn't. What would be the point? Nobody asked for that kind of story here. At dinner, I sit across from a man named Thomas. He used to be a truck driver. We talk sometimes. He told me his son moved to California and never came back. He said, "You know what the worst part is? Not knowing if they even think about you." I told him I understood, because I do. I think the same thing every night before I go to bed. Does Michael ever remember the time I built his bed from scratch? Does Julie remember the coat I bought her for her first job interview? Does Daniel ever think about the fishing trips we took before sunrise? I try to stay sharp. I read the newspaper when I can. I do the crossword. I write things down to remember them, even though I keep most of it in my head. I walk the hallway back and forth, just to keep my legs strong. I sit up straight at meals even when my back aches. I refuse to give them the satisfaction of saying I'm deteriorating. I may be in a nursing home, but I'm still me. Still the man who worked every day for 40 years. Still the man who stayed faithful, paid every bill, kept every promise. I remember one morning last month it was cold and raining. They handed out plastic utensils instead of metal ones. Someone asked why, and the nurse said it was for safety. I sat there thinking, Is this what they think we've become? Risks, problems, inconveniences. Nobody asks what we did before we got here. Nobody wants to know that we were once the ones who kept everything running. One time, a volunteer came to play guitar for us. She was young, maybe 20. She sang songs from the 60s and 70s. Everyone clapped after each song. I clapped too, but quietly. At the end, she asked if anyone wanted to share a memory. I stood up. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted to remind myself that I still had a voice. I told them about the day I finished building our house. I told them about how Sarah cried when I showed her the finished kitchen. I told them I worked for months on that kitchen, just so she could finally have cabinets that didn't stick and a sink that drained properly. The volunteer smiled. She didn't say much. She just said, "That's beautiful," and then we moved on. That moment stayed with me, not because she said it was beautiful, but because I finally remembered what it felt like to be seen, not as a patient, not as a resident, but as a man, a husband, a worker, a father. Sometimes at night I lie in bed and look at the ceiling and think about what I would say to my kids if they ever walked through that door. I don't know if I'd ask them why they forgot me, or if I'd just hug them and pretend it never happened. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe I just want to see their faces and remember that once, long ago, we were a family that sat at the same table and passed mashed potatoes while laughing about nothing. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Here, every day is the same, but I know one thing. I didn't end up here because I failed. I ended up here because I trusted that hard work and love would be enough. I see now that life doesn't always work that way, but I'm still here, still breathing, still remembering, and maybe that's what matters. There are moments when I sit in this room and hear nothing but the humming of the fluorescent light above my head. The hallway stays quiet between meal times. Sometimes you hear a wheelchair rolling or a soft cough from the room next door. Other times you hear someone crying, not loud, just a soft weeping, the kind that people try to hide with a blanket over their face. Most days, no one checks in unless it's time for pills or food. The staff has too much to do, too many names on their lists. I don't blame them, but that doesn't make it easier. I've always been a man who noticed small things. When I was younger, I could tell if a screw was loose just by the way a door sounded when it opened. I could look at a piece of wood and know whether it would split when nailed. Now I notice things that no one talks about. The way the man down the hall stopped shaving last week. The way Mrs. Arnold, who always wears red, stopped showing up in the common room. They said she was moved to the hospital wing. That usually means they're not coming back. They don't tell us when someone passes. One day their room is closed, and a week later, someone else has moved in. That's it. No goodbye, no name on the wall, no picture. You spend months eating next to someone, and when they're gone, it's like they never existed. I find that hard to accept. I remember every neighbor I ever had, every friend from work, every cousin who came by once a year with a fruitcake. But here, names disappear fast. I still get up early, even though I don't have a reason. It's a habit I kept from my working days. Back then, I'd wake up before the sun, put on my boots, and head out while the town was still quiet. I liked that silence. It meant the day hadn't been touched yet. Now the silence feels different. It doesn't wait for something to start. It just sits there, heavy, waiting for nothing. I try not to complain when the nurse checks my blood pressure or when they tell me I need to eat more fiber. I nod, say thank you, and do what they say. But inside, I think about how far I am from who I used to be. I think about the shelves I built in the old house. They're probably still there. Maybe someone else is using them now. Maybe my kids sold the place and didn't tell me. I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't asked. Part of me is afraid of the answer. One afternoon, I asked Angela, the caregiver, if I could get a photo of my old house. She said she'd try. A week passed and nothing came. I didn't mention it again. I've learned not to expect much around here. Promises are made quickly and forgotten just as fast. I don't blame her. She's overworked. But it's those little things that start to build up. You stop asking. You stop expecting. You just sit. They organize activities now and then. Bingo on Tuesdays. Movie nights on Fridays. Sometimes music. I tried to join a few times, but bingo made me feel like I was in a waiting room. The movies were too loud. Most of the time, I go just to be around people. Not because I care about the movie, but because I want to hear voices. I want to hear people say words that aren't instructions or reminders. I want to feel like I'm still part of the world, even if it's just for an hour. Last Friday, they played an old black and white film. I don't remember the name, but I remember the music. It was a song Sarah used to hum when she cooked. I closed my eyes and saw her standing at the stove, apron on, stirring a pot with one hand and swaying her hips just a little with the other. She used to hum without even realizing it. That memory hit me hard. I had to excuse myself before the film ended. I went back to my room and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. Not because I was sad, because I missed being part of a moment like that. I missed being needed, being useful. There was a time when everything in my house house depended on me. If the pipe leaked, I fixed it. If the roof had a crack, I patched it. If the car didn't start, I figured it out. Now, everything I do depends on someone else. If I want water, I press a button. If I need the bathroom, I wait for someone to come. If I feel dizzy, I have to ask someone to take my temperature. It's like the world flipped and no one warned me. Daniel used to say I was the strongest man he knew. He told his friends, "My dad can fix anything." I wonder if he still says that. I wonder if he tells his kids about me, if they even know where I am. Julie's kids used to call me Grandpa Harry. I don't know if they remember me now. Maybe they think I'm just old and tired. Maybe they don't think about me at all. I try to forgive. I really do. I know they didn't put me here out of hatred. Maybe they thought it was the safest option. Maybe they thought they were helping. But it's hard not to feel like I was put away, like an old toolbox no one needs anymore. You don't throw it out, but you don't reach for it either. You just leave it in the shed collecting dust. There's a man here named Frank. He used to be a teacher. He told me he taught high school history for over 30 years. He knows every U.S. president in order, every war, every major battle. But when I asked if his students ever visited, he laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind that says, "Of course not." He said, "They loved me when they needed a grade. After that, I was just another face in a yearbook." That hit me, because I feel the same. When my kids needed shoes, a ride, someone to hold the flashlight under the car hood, I was there. Now that I need a visit or a hug or a simple hello, there's no one. I don't expect to change anything by telling this. I'm not asking for pity. I just want someone out there to know this happens, that you can give everything, follow every rule, do everything right, and still end up in a place like this wondering where everyone went. Sometimes when the window is open just enough, I hear the cars outside. I imagine one of them stopping. The door opens, footsteps, and one of my kids walks in, says, "Hey Dad, I thought I'd drop by." I imagine it so clearly that for a second I believe it's real. Then nothing happens, just the wind. I go back to my chair. I look at the small clock. I wonder how many hours are left until dinner. And I remind myself that I'm still here, still waiting, still hoping, even if I pretend not to. I never thought I'd be the type of man who waits by the window, but that's what I've become. I don't wait for a package. I don't wait for the mail. I wait for something else, maybe a visit, maybe a phone call, maybe just a moment that feels different from all the others. Days in this place blur together like wet ink on cheap paper. They feed us the same meals in rotation: eggs, toast, oatmeal. Then lunch is soup, a sandwich, and sometimes a small dessert. Dinner comes early before the sun is down, and then the halls go quiet, too quiet. Some nights I lay in bed and try to picture the inside of my old house. I see the faded yellow walls in the kitchen. I remember the sound the door made when it shut too hard. I see the frame of Sarah's photo on the mantel. I try not to think about whether that photo is still there. I like to imagine it is, that maybe someone kept it, that maybe my face is still in a drawer somewhere, not thrown out, not erased. The staff says it's important to keep a routine. They say routine helps with memory, helps keep our minds active. So I wake up, I make my bed, I brush my teeth. I shave every other day even though no one would notice if I didn't. I sit up straight. I say thank you to the nurses even when they rush in and out without looking me in the eyes. I do all of that because if I stop, I'm afraid I'll disappear like the others. There was a man named Roy who used to sit 2 tables over during meals. He never talked much, but he always nodded at me. One day, his chair was empty. The next day, too. On the 3rd day, I asked where he went. One of the nurses said he had a fall and was transferred to a different facility. But I knew what that meant. A few weeks later, someone else was sitting in that chair. That's how it goes here. Someone disappears, and the space gets filled like nothing happened. Angela, the caregiver I mentioned before, sometimes stops by to say hello. She doesn't always have time, but when she does, she talks to me like I'm still someone, not just a patient or a number. Last week, she asked me if I ever traveled. I told her I drove to Missouri once years ago to see a cousin who had just opened a diner. I laughed, remembering how the truck broke down halfway there, and I had to fix it with tape and a coat hanger. She laughed too. That felt good. Just that sound. Just knowing someone heard me and didn't look away. I think about my kids every day. Not in anger. Not even in sadness, really. Just in wonder. Do they think about me? Do they pass by a tool shed and remember I used to fix everything with my bare hands? Do they drive through our old neighborhood and remember the porch I rebuilt twice without asking for help? Or did all of it fade away as soon as I became inconvenient? I don't want to be dramatic. I know life is busy. I know people grow up and move on. I just thought family meant more. That's what I taught them after all. Family comes first. You help each other. You show up. You don't leave anyone behind. But here I am, left behind. A few days ago, I found an old man sitting alone in the recreation room. He was crying. quietly. I sat next to him, didn't say anything at first. He didn't look up. After a few minutes, he whispered, "I was a doctor. For 40 years, I saved lives. Now I can't remember what I had for breakfast." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? I just put my hand on his shoulder. We sat like that for a while. Maybe he needed that silence as much as I did. I've learned that most of us here were somebody. We were the ones people turned to when something broke, when someone got sick, when a tire went flat, when a light went out. We were the problem solvers, the steady hands, the ones who didn't flinch. Now we sit in wheelchairs while strangers tie our shoes. That's the part that hits the hardest. Not just the silence, not just the waiting, but the knowledge that everything we were is invisible to everyone else now. We were pillars once, now we're shadows, and nobody seems to notice the change. Some of the residents don't get out of bed anymore. They stay under the covers, eyes open, waiting for the day to pass. I try not to end up like that. I walk the hallway twice a day, even if my knees hurt. I take deep breaths outside when they let me out in the courtyard. I sit on the bench and feel the sun, even when it burns a little, because I want to feel something real. I don't want to lose the parts of me that are still here. I remember the smell of motor oil, the sound of Sarah humming while she cooked, the feel of cold beer after mowing the lawn. I remember the look on Michael's face when I handed him the keys to his first car. I remember how Julie used to write me notes and leave them on the kitchen table before school. I remember Daniel sitting next to me while I worked, asking questions about nails and hammers and why wood bends. All those moments live inside me. I carry them with me like tools in a belt no one sees. Sometimes I hear other residents whispering at night. They talk to people who aren't there. Wives, sons, friends who passed away. I understand that. I really do. I talk to Sarah in my head all the time. I tell her about my day, about the nurse who gave me the wrong pill and apologized 5 times, about the socks I lost in the laundry, about the new guy who snores so loud we can hear him from 3 rooms away. I tell her these things because it makes me feel like she's still listening, that I'm still part of something. There are moments of kindness, a nurse who brings an extra cookie, a volunteer who asks your name and actually remembers it the next day. Those moments are rare, but they matter. They're small lights in a place that's mostly gray. I still believe in being useful. Even here, I help fold towels when I can. I fix the wheels on walkers if they squeak. I help the new residents find their rooms. It's not much, but it gives me purpose, and maybe that's the only thing that keeps me going. After 40 years of working, I never imagined this. I thought I'd be at home, maybe with family nearby, maybe in a small room of my own with photos on the wall and a chair that remembers my shape. Instead, I have this bed, this drawer, this number above my door, but I'm still here, still standing, in my own way. There was a man who used to visit his mother here every Sunday. I didn't know his name, and I never spoke to him, but I watched. He'd walk through the front doors carrying a small bag with oranges, newspapers, and sometimes flowers. He'd sit with her by the window, feed her if she couldn't eat on her own, and comb her hair. She didn't talk much, but he still talked to her like she could hear every word. I watched this happen week after week. Then one Sunday, he didn't come, and the next Sunday the same. I asked one of the nurses about him, and she just said, she passed. He was here for the funeral. And just like that, another story ended quietly. It made me think of my own children again. If I passed tomorrow, would they even know? Would they come for the funeral? Would they cry? Or would it just be a phone call that gets passed around, a few minutes of silence on their end, followed by, well, he was old, or at least he's at peace now. That's what people say when they don't know what else to say, but peace doesn't mean much when you've been forgotten while still alive. I don't want to die with this feeling. The feeling that everything I built ended up in someone else's hands and I wasn't even there to see what they did with it. I want to believe that my work meant something, that all those hours on the job, all the scraped knuckles and missed holidays, all the quiet sacrifices, weren't for nothing. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had spoken up more when I was younger. Maybe if I had told Michael that I missed him instead of just saying, "Take care," every time he left. Maybe if I had told Julie how proud I was when she became a teacher. Maybe if I had told Daniel that I forgave him for all the things he never apologized for. But I didn't. I thought actions were enough. I thought being present, working hard, and never abandoning them would speak for itself. Now I'm not sure if they ever heard any of it. I've thought about writing letters, not to blame them, but to explain, to say everything I couldn't before. But who would I send them to? Would they read them? Or would they just sit unopened in a drawer, forgotten like me? One of the nurses asked me if I had any last wishes. I told her I didn't, but the truth is, I do. I wish I could sit at the same table with my children one more time. Just one dinner. No special occasion. No big speeches. Just a meal with all of them sitting across from me. I'd listen more than I spoke. I'd memorize their voices. I'd take in every wrinkle, every smile, every movement. I'd say, "I'm still your father. I still remember everything, and I still care." But that's a wish, not a plan. Around here, you learn not to expect too much. The days continue, slow and repetitive. Breakfast, medication, rest, lunch, a short walk in the hallway, dinner, sleep. The cycle doesn't change, even if you do. I keep a mental list of things I used to do. I used to fix cars. I used to hang drywall. I used to chop wood. I used to dance with my wife in the living room with no music on. I used to lift my kids and carry them to bed. I used to climb ladders without a second thought. I used to run. Now I walk slowly. I hold the handrail. I wait for help. I listen more than I speak, because people get impatient when you take too long to finish a sentence. There's a man 2 rooms down from mine. His name is Gerald. He doesn't talk much, but sometimes we sit near each other in the common room. One day he looked at me and said, "Do you ever feel like you're just waiting to be erased?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. That's how it feels sometimes. Like every day that passes here takes away a little piece of you. Not all at once, just slowly. A little memory here, a little name there, a little silence replacing what used to be noise. I try to fight it, but I feel it happening. Angela told me the other day that a group of high school kids might come to visit. She said it would be part of a community project. They'd talk to us, maybe play cards, maybe read something. I told her it was a nice idea, and I meant it, but part of me also wonders if those kids will look at us like artifacts, like pages from a history book they don't need to study for the test. Still, I'll show up, I'll smile, I'll answer their questions, because maybe, just maybe one of them will remember what I said. Maybe one of them will look at their own grandparents differently after that. Maybe that will matter. There's not much I can do to change where I am, but I can still choose how I live inside it. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to grow bitter. I want to hold on to whatever dignity I have left. I want to keep my mind sharp, my manners intact, my voice steady. At night, I close my eyes and picture my old workshop, the wooden table, the tools hanging on hooks, the smell of sawdust and oil. I remember the sound of Sarah laughing in the next room. I remember the warmth of a house filled with people who hadn't forgotten me yet. After 40 years of working, this isn't how I thought my story would end, but the ending hasn't come yet. I'm still breathing, still thinking, still remembering, and maybe that's enough for now. Last week, a new resident moved into the room next to mine. His name is Charles, and he's about 5 years younger than me. That makes him 77. He walks slowly and has a deep voice. On the first day, he didn't talk much. He just nodded politely whenever someone greeted him. I could tell he wasn't ready to be here. None of us are, but some pretend better than others. Charles didn't pretend. His face said everything. He was angry, not the loud kind, the quiet, heavy kind that sits in your chest and doesn't go away. After a few days, he and I ended up in the common room at the same time. I was reading the newspaper, or at least looking at it. He sat nearby and asked if I was from around here. I told him I grew up in Kentucky and lived most of my life about an hour outside Louisville. He said he was from Tennessee. We talked for about 20 minutes. He told me he owned a small business, fixed lawnmowers and tractors, said he had 3 kids, but hadn't seen them in almost 2 years. I didn't ask why. I didn't have to. I already knew what that felt like. Charles said something that stuck with me. He said, "I don't mind dying. I just don't want to die in a place where nobody knows who I am." That hit hard, because that's exactly what this place can do to you. It makes you feel like a version of yourself that doesn't match what you used to be. Like everything you did before doesn't matter anymore. Like your story stopped when you crossed through these doors. Most of the staff here are young. Some are kind. Others are just tired. You can see it in the way they talk. Fast, distracted, always thinking about the next patient. They don't have time to ask questions. They don't want to hear about the past. They want to get through their shift, and I get it. But still, it hurts when someone forgets your name, or when they call you sweetheart or buddy, instead of just asking, "Mr. Jennings, how are you today?" Names matter. They remind you that you're a person, not just a bed number. I used to teach my kids that respect starts with names. You look people in the eyes. You shake their hand firmly. You listen. That's how I was raised, and that's how I raised them. Now I sometimes go entire days without hearing my name spoken properly, and when I do hear it, it almost surprises me. The other day I asked one of the nurses if she could help me trim my nails. She said she'd come back in a few minutes. I waited. Half an hour passed, then an hour. I got up and walked to the nurse's station. She had forgotten, not on purpose. She was busy, but it still made me feel invisible. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. I stared at my hands. These are the same hands that built my house, that held my children, that changed tires on rainy nights. Now they wait quietly for someone to notice them. Charles and I started sitting together more often. We don't talk much, but when we do, it's usually about simple things. Weather, food, things we used to do. He told me he used to go fishing with his oldest son. He said they'd drive out before sunrise and sit for hours without saying a word. Just sitting, waiting, laughing sometimes. I told him about how I used to spend Sundays fixing small things around the house just to avoid thinking too much. We both laughed at that. It was the kind of laugh that comes from recognizing yourself in someone else. They held a small birthday celebration in the dining hall last Tuesday. Not for me, for one of the women who turned 90. They brought out cupcakes, sang a quick version of Happy Birthday, and then everyone returned to their rooms. I watched from a distance. I didn't know her name. I don't think most people did. But for a few minutes, she smiled like she felt seen, like she mattered. I wanted to go up to her and say something, but I stayed in my chair. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to interrupt the moment, or maybe I just didn't know what to say anymore. Sometimes I catch myself checking the hallway for footsteps. I listen closely. Maybe someone is coming to visit. Maybe someone will knock on the door and surprise me. But the footsteps usually belong to the nurse, or the man who cleans the floor, or someone wheeling another resident to dinner. I try not to expect too much. That's how you avoid disappointment. Angela, the caregiver, told me yesterday that she's leaving next month. She got a better job offer at a different facility. I smiled and told her I was happy for her, and I meant it. But inside, I felt something drop. Angela is one of the only people here who talks to me like I still matter, like I'm not just another old man waiting for time to pass. When she goes, I don't know who will fill that space. Maybe no one. That's how it works here. People come, people leave, and the rest of us just keep waiting. I've learned not to ask too many questions. If someone moves out of their room, you don't ask where they went. If someone's bed is suddenly empty, you look the other way. You pretend it's normal. You don't want to think about what it means because one day it'll be your room they clean out, your name they remove from the door. Every night, I look at the same small picture frame on the nightstand. It's one of the few things I was allowed to bring. It has a photo of Sarah and me sitting on the porch. She's holding a cup of tea. I'm wearing my old flannel shirt. We're not smiling for the camera. We're just looking at each other. It's my favorite picture because it wasn't planned. It wasn't posed. It was real. I keep that photo close because it reminds me that once I had a life full of moments that mattered. I was someone's husband, someone's father, someone's friend. Now I'm just a resident in room 28. But that picture proves there was more to me once, more than what these beige walls and plastic trays suggest. There are nights I close my eyes and talk to Sarah. I tell her about my day, about Charles, about Angela, about the silence that wraps this place after dinner. I tell her I miss her, that I wish she were here, or that I were there with her, wherever she is. I don't know if anyone hears those words, but I say them anyway, because it reminds me that I'm still here, that I haven't given up. After 40 years of working, I didn't think I'd end up in a place like this, but I'm here, and as long as I'm here, I'll keep remembering. I'll keep talking. I'll keep trying to hold on to whatever parts of myself haven't been forgotten. This morning I woke up before the staff turned on the hallway lights. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle. The heater kicked in with a low rumble. A cart rolled by outside. Somewhere down the hall someone was coughing. That's how I know I'm still alive, the sounds that remind me the place is still moving, even if most of us aren't. When breakfast arrived, I already knew what it would be. Scrambled eggs, half a slice of toast, and a banana. The eggs are always lukewarm and the toast is soft like it's been sitting for too long. I ate in silence, like usual. Thomas, who sits across from me, didn't say much either. He just nodded when I sat down and pushed his tray aside after a few bites. He's been eating less lately. I think the routine is wearing on him too. After breakfast, they gathered a few of us for what they called music therapy. A volunteer brought in a small keyboard and played songs from the 50s and 60s. Some residents clapped. A few smiled. I sat there quietly, listening. One of the songs reminded me of the time Sarah and I went dancing at the community center. It was our anniversary. We were never good dancers, but she made me feel like I was Fred Astaire. I could still picture the way she looked at me that night, her eyes full of light, her laugh filling the room. I kept that memory to myself. When the music ended, we were wheeled or walked back to our rooms. I told the aide I wanted to sit in the courtyard for a few minutes. The air was crisp and the sun wasn't too strong. I sat on a bench near the wall, facing a patch of grass with a few tired-looking flowers. From where I sat, I could see the back of the parking lot. Cars came and went. I imagined one of them stopping for me, but no one did. It's always like that. A quiet wish followed by quiet reality. Charles joined me not long after. He sat beside me without saying anything for the first 10 minutes. Then he said, "I had a dream last night. I was back in my old workshop, fixing a motor. I could smell the oil. I could feel the heat of the light over my head. I didn't want to wake up. I nodded and told him I had a dream once where I was driving again. No traffic, no destination, just me and the road. We both laughed softly, that kind of laugh people use when they know something is gone and not coming back. Charles asked if I had heard from my kids lately. I said no. He hadn't either. It's strange how quickly you can get used to that answer. No anger, no surprise, just a flat response you repeat over and over, like the answer has lost all weight, but deep down you still feel it. You just stop showing it. Later that day, a group of volunteers came in from a local high school. They walked down the hallway in pairs, smiling awkwardly. Most of them didn't know how to act around us. Some looked nervous, others looked bored. But there was one girl, maybe 16, who stopped at my door and asked if she could sit with me. I said sure. She pulled up a chair and asked my name. I told her, Harold Jennings. She wrote it down like it was something she didn't want to forget. She asked me what I did for a living. I told her I worked in construction for over 40 years, that I helped build homes, fix roads, restore buildings. Her eyes widened. She said, "That's a long time." I smiled. "Yes, it is." She asked what I missed the most. I thought about it. I didn't want to say my family. That felt too heavy for a teenager. So I said, "I miss walking into my house and hearing my wife call from the kitchen. I miss the smell of dinner on the stove and the sound of the television in the background. I miss knowing that I belonged somewhere." She nodded slowly. She didn't say much after that, but she didn't leave either. We sat for a while in comfortable silence. Before she left, she said, "Thank you for talking to me." And I said, "Thank you for listening." That small visit stayed with me for the rest of the day. Not because she said anything extraordinary, but because she looked at me, really looked, like I was still someone worth sitting with. By the evening, the building had returned to its usual pace. Dinner was meatloaf and green beans. Thomas didn't come down. I asked the nurse and she said he was resting. That usually means he didn't feel like eating, or something worse. You never really know here. They don't tell us much. After dinner, I went back to my room and sat in the chair by the window. The streetlights were just turning on. I could see the edge of a playground in the distance. It was empty. I imagined my grandchildren running there. I tried to picture their faces. I haven't seen them in years. I wonder if they'd recognize me now. I wonder if I'd recognize them. The nurse came in around 7 to give me my medication. She asked how my day was. I said, "It was good. I had a visitor." She smiled and said, "That's nice, Mr. Jennings." Then she checked the chart, handed me the cup with the pills, and left. That's how it is. Short moments quickly passed. I sat there for another hour. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't open a book. I just sat, thinking, remembering, hoping that maybe somewhere out there someone thought of me today. After 40 years of working, I still believe I deserved something better than this. Not luxury, not praise, just company, just a place where my name meant something, where my story didn't end in silence. But until then, I will keep sitting in this chair, by this window, watching the sky turn dark and the lights flicker on, one by one. It was raining this morning, not a storm, just a steady drizzle. I sat by the window for over an hour watching the drops hit the glass and slide down like slow-moving trails. The parking lot looked empty. A few cars came and went, mostly staff arriving for their shifts. No visitors today. I could tell before breakfast was even served. Rain always made me think of home. Back when I still lived in my own house, I used to fix things during rainy days. I didn't like sitting still, so if it was too wet to work outside, I stayed in the garage. I repaired broken lamps, cleaned tools, patched leaks under the sink. That was my routine. I stayed useful. I stayed busy. Now, when it rains, I sit and watch water run down a window in silence. They brought pancakes for breakfast. Soft, no syrup, just butter and a small cup of orange juice. I ate slowly. Across the table, an older woman named Ruth asked if it was Sunday. Nobody answered. She asked again. Then someone told her it was Thursday. She looked confused for a moment and then kept eating like nothing happened. That's how it is around here. Time doesn't matter much. Days blend together. They feed us, clean us, check our blood pressure, and do it all over again the next day. Later in the morning, a social worker came in and asked if I wanted to update my emergency contact information. I told her there's no one new to add. My children haven't changed their numbers, but they also haven't called. She asked if I'd like her to reach out to them on my behalf. I said no. If they wanted to talk, they would have done it by now. I don't want to beg for their time. I already gave them mine. There's a shelf in my room with a few small items, a comb, a Bible, the photo of Sarah, a folded American flag from my time in the army. I was never in combat, but I served. I wore the uniform. I followed orders. I stood tall when they raised the flag. That part of my life feels so distant now. No one here asks about that. They just see an old man who takes medicine 3 times a day and moves slowly. Angela passed by during her break. She's been packing boxes in the storage room between shifts. She told me next week will be her last. I asked where she was going, and she said a place with better hours and more pay. I nodded and said I was happy for her, but I wasn't. Not because I want to hold her back, but because she's the last person here who makes me feel seen. She remembers little things, how I like my coffee, that I don't care for bananas, that I enjoy sitting near the courtyard when the sun's out. Without her, this place will feel even more like a waiting room that never ends. I told her I'd miss her and she smiled. "I'll miss you too, Mr. Jennings," she said. "You're one of the good ones." That meant more than she probably knew. After lunch, I walked slowly down the hall, passing doors with names I don't recognize anymore. Some of the residents stay inside all day. They don't talk. They don't move much. I wonder if that's my future too. A bed, a tray of food, and silence. Charles wasn't at lunch again. I checked his room later and found it empty. The bed was made. The nightstand cleared. I asked the nurse and she just said, he was transferred. That's all they tell us. Transferred. But we know what that means. Another one gone. Another story closed quietly. We never get closure here. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just another empty chair at breakfast. Another face gone from the hallway. I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed for a while. I thought about Charles's dream, the one where he was back in his old workshop. I hope wherever he is now, he's back in that dream. Around 3 in the afternoon, I was scheduled for a physical therapy session. They wheel us down a hallway to a small room with rubber mats and handrails. A young man named Eric helps with the exercises. He's polite but always in a hurry. Today he asked me to stand and hold the rail while doing small leg lifts. I did what I could. My left knee aches constantly, but I pushed through. He didn't ask how I was feeling, just marked something on his clipboard and said we were done for the day. I said thank you anyway, because that's what I was taught. You thank people, even when it hurts. After therapy, I stopped by the small library near the common room. It's barely a room, just 2 short shelves with worn paperbacks and a few puzzles. I looked through the books, not really searching for anything. I used to read at night before bed, westerns mostly. I liked stories where men did what they had to do. Quiet strength, that's how I always saw myself. Now I read slowly. Sometimes the words blur. Sometimes I have to go back and read the same line 3 times, but I still try. I don't want to forget how. I don't want to lose one more part of myself. Dinner was soup and crackers. Light meals lately. I think they're cutting costs. The soup had too much salt, but I ate it anyway. The man next to me, Leonard, kept nodding off during the meal. His head would drop, then jerk up. I wondered if he knew where he was. I wondered if anyone was coming for him anytime soon. Back in my room, I sat by the window again. Same view, same light pole, same silence. I watched the rain fade into mist. The pavement looked dark and wet. I tried to remember the sound of my truck starting, the feel of my work boots on the steps, the creak of the back door when I'd come home late from a job. I used to come home tired but proud. I'd take off my boots, sit down at the table, and Sarah would bring me a glass of water. We'd talk about the day. Nothing important, just simple things. Now there's no one to talk to, no one to ask how my day was, no one to notice if I'm quiet or if I'm hurting. I think a lot about how we measure our lives. By years? By what we owned? By the job we did? I thought I was building something that would last. A legacy. A family that stayed connected. But what I built faded faster than I expected. And now I'm here, in a room with peeling paint and a chair that rocks unevenly, wondering if anything I did will be remembered. After 40 years of working, I thought I'd be surrounded by family. I thought I'd be in my home, maybe with grandchildren visiting, maybe hearing laughter in the other room. Instead, I hear buzzers and wheels and the sound of the elevator doors opening and closing. But I'm still here, and as long as I can speak, I'll keep telling my story. Because silence is worse than loneliness, and I refuse to be forgotten quietly. This morning they changed my roommate. The man who used to sleep in the bed across from mine, Mr. Collins, was moved during the night. He had trouble breathing for days. I heard them call the ambulance around 2 in the morning. I stayed in my bed and listened. The wheels of the gurney, the soft voices, the doors swinging open and closed. No one came back to explain what happened. By sunrise, the bed was stripped, the nightstand was empty, and it was like he had never been there. The nurses didn't say much, just that he had been transferred. That word again, transferred. That's what they tell us when someone leaves and never comes back. By noon, a new man was already in the room. His name is Eugene. He didn't bring much with him, just a duffel bag, a coat, and a single framed picture of a younger version of himself holding a child. He didn't speak much when he arrived, just nodded when I said hello. I remember thinking, he looks like I did when I first got here, uncertain, angry, trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. I gave him some space. I know how it feels to be dropped into a room you didn't choose, next to a stranger you didn't ask for. This place doesn't give you time to adjust. One day you're in your home, maybe watching your favorite chair sit by the window, and the next day you're in a place with numbers on the door and strangers giving you your meals. After lunch, Eugene asked me if the food ever got better. I smiled and told him no, but you get used to it. That made him laugh a little, a short, tired laugh. We talked a little more. He used to work in a print shop, said he ran machines for 35 years, said his back still hurts from all the lifting. I told him I used to be in construction. We compared stories about long days, heavy loads, tools we don't see anymore. That's the only kind of conversation that still feels familiar here, talking about work, talking about what we used to do, because that's where we still feel like ourselves. Later in the day, there was a group activity scheduled. They brought in a woman with a cart full of art supplies, watercolors, brushes, colored pencils. They said we were going to paint. Some residents looked confused. Some refused. A few joined in. I decided to try, not because I think I'm an artist, but because I wanted something different to do. They gave me a small canvas and asked me to paint something that reminded me of home. I stared at the blank space for a while. Then I picked up a brush and painted the outline of a small house with a porch. I added trees, a small truck in the driveway, a chair under the window. I kept it simple, but when I finished, I felt something. Not pride exactly, just a sense of recognition, like I had put something back together even if only in color. One of the aides saw my painting and said it looked peaceful. I nodded, but in my head, I was thinking about how that house is probably gone now, or if it's still there, it's not mine anymore. Maybe it was sold. Maybe someone else lives there. Maybe my name isn't anywhere near it anymore. After the activity, I walked back to my room slowly. Eugene was asleep. I sat in my chair by the window and watched the sky change colors. The sun was going down. Shadows stretched across the floor. I thought about Sarah. I always do around this time. I wonder what she'd say if she saw me here. Would she be angry? Would she tell the kids off for leaving me? Or would she sit next to me, hold my hand and tell me it's going to be okay? I don't know, but I like to think about her anyway. Dinner was chicken and rice. No salt, no flavor. I ate it because it was there. That's how it goes. You eat what they give you. You take the pills they place in your hand. You let them guide your wheelchair. You say thank you. You nod. You adjust. That's survival here. Not comfort, not joy, just acceptance. Angela wasn't on shift today, I noticed. The room feels different without her voice in the hallway. She always brought energy with her. Not loud or forced, just the kind of presence that made the place feel less cold. She told me her last day would be next Thursday. I keep counting the days. I don't want to, but I do, because I know once she leaves, that little light goes with her. In the evening, Eugene woke up and asked if it was still Tuesday. I told him it was. He looked at the wall for a long time and then said, I thought it was Saturday. My daughter used to visit on Saturdays. He didn't say anything else after that, just laid back and stared at the ceiling. I didn't ask questions. Sometimes it's better to just sit with the silence. I used to think old age would come slowly, that I'd have time to prepare, but that's not how it works. It sneaks up on you. One day you're helping your neighbor move furniture. The next, you're struggling to put on your socks. And then one morning, your son tells you it might be safer if you had full-time care. Then you're here, and the life you knew is on the other side of a locked door. Sometimes I look at the other residents and wonder what their stories are, who they were before this, what they did, who they loved. I want to ask, but I don't want to pry. So we sit near each other and talk about the weather, about how the soup was too hot or too cold, about how the nurse who gives the best sponge baths got moved to another wing. We keep things light, safe, because anything deeper is too hard. When the lights dim for the night and the hallway grows quiet, that's when the real thoughts come, the ones you push away during the day. I think about my children. I think about the last time we were all in the same room. I think about how I watched them drive away after dropping me off here. No one cried, no one said, this is just for a while. They just said, you'll be okay, Dad. And then they left. I haven't seen them since. Sometimes I imagine they're busy. Other times I imagine they're too ashamed. Maybe they don't know what to say. Maybe they think I'm better off here. I don't know. I stopped trying to figure it out. It only hurts more when you do. But still, I hope. Every morning when I wake up and look at the door, a small part of me thinks maybe today will be different. Maybe I'll hear a knock. Maybe I'll see their faces. Maybe they'll come back to see what I've become. And maybe they'll remember who I used to be. Today started like most others. I woke up before anyone came in. The room was still dark, and for a moment I forgot where I was. That used to happen a lot when I first arrived here. I'd wake up and expect to see the ceiling fan in my old bedroom or hear the sound of the refrigerator humming from the kitchen. Instead, I saw a plain ceiling, a white wall, and the shadow of the bed across from mine. That's how my days begin now, slowly, quietly, and with a small reminder that I'm not home. Eugene was already awake. He didn't say anything, just nodded when he saw I was up too. We've gotten used to each other. We don't talk much in the mornings, but sometimes that's enough. Just knowing someone else is there, it helps. They brought breakfast around 7, oatmeal with a slice of toast and a cup of lukewarm coffee. I didn't say anything when the toast was cold. I just ate it. You learn not to complain. Complaining doesn't change much here. The nurses are doing their best. The kitchen staff too. But this place isn't made for comfort. It's made for order, for survival. Later in the morning, they brought in a new activities coordinator. Young man, probably in his late 20s. He tried hard to get people excited, asked who wanted to play word games or do a group puzzle. Most people stayed quiet. A few nodded politely and went along. I stayed in my chair by the window. He came over and asked if I wanted to join. I said I was fine where I was. He smiled and said, let me know if you change your mind. At least he tried. It's strange how, after a while, you stop expecting anything new. Every day feels like the one before. You eat, you rest, you wait. But once in a while, Something shifts, a small moment, a different face, a smell that reminds you of something lost. That's all it takes to pull you back into who you were, if only for a second. Today, while I was sitting near the hallway, I overheard a woman talking to her mother. She was visiting from out of state, said she could only stay an hour, but during that hour, she brushed her mother's hair, showed her photos on her phone, and held her hand the entire time. The old woman didn't say a word. She just watched her daughter, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe she was real. I couldn't stop watching them, not because I was jealous, but because I wanted to memorize what that kind of love looked like. I haven't seen it in a long time. When the daughter left, she hugged her mother and whispered something in her ear. Then she walked past me and said, "Good afternoon, sir." I nodded. My voice caught in my throat. I wanted to say something back, but I didn't know what. Maybe just, "Thank you for coming." But I didn't. After lunch, I sat in the courtyard. The sun came out for a bit, and the air felt less heavy. I looked up at the sky and tried to remember the last time I stood in my own backyard. The grass, the worn wooden fence, the garden Sarah kept full of tomatoes and herbs. I used to mow the lawn every Saturday morning. I remember the smell of cut grass, the sweat on my back, and the sound of the radio playing from the garage. That life feels like it happened to someone else now. Angela came by in the afternoon. She's only got a few more days before she leaves for good. I asked if she was nervous about the new job. She said a little, but mostly excited. I told her she'd be great. She smiled and said she'd miss me. I believed her. Not because she had to say it, but because her eyes didn't look away when she said it. That's how you know someone means it. I gave her the small painting I made during the art activity, the one of the house with the porch and the truck in the driveway. I said she didn't have to keep it, but she took it and said, "This looks like home." I told her. It was. That was the longest conversation I had all day. Dinner was chicken with peas and mashed potatoes. I couldn't eat much. My stomach felt tight and I didn't have much of an appetite. Eugene ate quietly next to me. He's been talking less lately. I asked if he was feeling okay, and he just shrugged. That's how people answer here when they don't want to talk about it. Back in my room, I looked at my hands. They're thinner now, the veins more visible, but I still see the same hands that lifted bricks, hammered nails, turned wrenches, held my children. These hands built a life, and now they rest on my lap, still waiting for something to hold. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if one of my kids walked in right now. What would I say? What would they say? Would we hug? Would they sit down and ask how I've been? Or would it be awkward silence? Apologies that come too late? I think about that a lot. I imagine every word, every possible version of that conversation, and then I remind myself not to expect it. I haven't heard from them. Not one call, not one letter, not even a birthday card. I stopped checking the mail weeks ago. The nurse still leaves it on the table in case something comes, but nothing ever does. At first it made me angry. Then it made me sad. Now I just feel numb to it. But even numbness has cracks, little openings where memory and emotion slip through. I'll see something, a boy running with his grandfather in the parking lot, a woman folding her husband's sweater, and something in me aches. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet pull, a reminder that I once had that too. After 40 years of working, I didn't think I'd end up like this. I didn't think I'd spend my days counting pills and meals instead of building things or helping neighbors. I didn't think my biggest hope would be a 5-minute visit that never comes, but I'm still here. And every morning I wake up and sit in the same chair, look out the same window and remind myself that I'm still me. Even if no one calls, even if the room is quiet, even if my name is spoken less and less, tomorrow is another day, and I'll be here for it. I don't know how many days I have left. I'm not sick, not that I know of, but there's something about this place that makes you think more about endings than beginnings. The air is still, the routine is steady, and the world outside feels farther away with each passing week. I'm not afraid of dying. I've seen enough, done enough, lived enough to know that death comes for everyone. What I'm afraid of is dying without mattering, dying without being remembered by the people I gave everything to. Sometimes I think about my funeral, not because I want one, but because I wonder who would show up. Would my children come? Would they bring their families? Would they talk about me like they knew me or just say what sounds right? Would someone cry because I was gone, or because they realized too late what they let slip away? I keep going over everything I did for them, every job I took, every sacrifice I made, every late night, every weekend I spent fixing things, driving, building, helping. I didn't do it for applause. I didn't do it for payback. I did it because that's what a father does. He shows up, he provides, he stays, and I stayed, no matter how hard it got. I stayed through the fights, through the sickness, through the debt, through the silence, and this is where I ended up. They haven't called, they haven't written, not even once. It's been more than a year now. I know their numbers haven't changed. I know they know where I am. I told them when they dropped me off. I saw it in their eyes. that they didn't think they'd be back soon, but I still hoped. Every single day I hoped, and now that hope has turned into something else, something colder, something heavier. I see other families visit. I watch them from the hallway. Grandchildren running in with balloons, sons carrying bags of clothes, daughters hugging their mothers and brushing their hair. It happens every week. I sit and watch and smile like I'm happy for them. And I am, but I also sit there wondering what I did wrong, what made me so easy to forget. Angela left last Thursday. She came by my room before her shift ended and gave me a small envelope. Inside was a card that said thank you. She wrote that I reminded her of her grandfather, that I was kind and steady, and that she would never forget our conversations. I sat with that card in my lap for a long time after she left. It was the first time in months that someone said I mattered, even a little. I've kept that card in the drawer next to my bed. I take it out sometimes just to remind myself that I wasn't invisible to everyone, that at least one person saw me, really saw me, the way Sarah used to, the way I used to believe my kids would. I still think about Sarah every night. I talk to her like she's sitting in the chair beside me. I tell her what I saw, what I felt, who I talked to. I tell her about the new nurse, the new residents, the ones who left. I tell her I miss her more than ever. I tell her I wish she could have stayed just a little longer. She would have known what to do, she always did. Sometimes I wonder what she would say if she knew how things turned out. I think she would be disappointed, not in me, but in them. I think she would be heartbroken to know that after everything, this is how it ended. But maybe she'd also tell me that I did my part, that I gave what I could, that I kept my promises. I've learned a lot sitting in this room. I've learned how to wait. I've learned how to accept things I never wanted. I've learned how to smile when it hurts and how to hold back tears when no one is watching. I've learned that growing old isn't the hard part. Being forgotten is. There's a man here now named Paul. He moved into the room 2 doors down. He's quiet like I am, keeps to himself. But the other day, he saw me in the hallway and asked if this place ever gets easier. I looked at him for a long moment and said, "No, it doesn't, but you get better at pretending it does." He didn't laugh. He just nodded. That's how you know someone understands. They brought in a therapy dog today, a golden retriever named Sam. The residents lit up when he walked in. People who haven't spoken in days started smiling. I watched from the corner of the room. I didn't reach out to pet him. I just watched. Not because I don't like dogs, but because I didn't want to feel that kind of warmth if I knew it would be gone in 10 minutes. That's what this place does. It gives you moments, then it takes them back. Sometimes I hear my name over the intercom, usually for medical reasons, a checkup, a test, a reminder. But every time I hear it, I sit up a little straighter. I tell myself that names still matter, that being called by your name means someone still knows who you are. I don't know how this story ends. I don't know when the last meal will come or the last visitor or the last time I look out this window. But I know this. I gave everything I had. 40 years of hard work. A life built with hands, sweat, patience, and love. I did it all without asking for much. Just the hope that when I was old I wouldn't be alone. Now I sit in a room with white walls, a small shelf, a window that looks out onto a parking lot, and a chair that creaks when I lean back. I sit here with my memories, my name, and the silence that fills the space where my family used to be. But I keep going. I wake up, I eat, I move, I speak when someone listens, and I remember, because that's all I have left. And if someone hears this someday, if someone out there is still listening, maybe they'll understand what this place really is. After 40 years of working, they put me in a nursing home, and even now I'm still waiting to be remembered.